You can pick my brain all day long. I don't care.
Yeah, if I spend that kind of bread on the equipment, you know,
yeah,
I'd definitely be calling you and be like, hey, I need you to come down here.
yeah, man. Because I mean, that's what I'm saying is that the where you really want to spend your money is microphones and preamps. That's where the magic happens, you know. And how you store it, yeah, that is not so expensive. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
okay, sure.
You want
give you an example. Yeah, it's the signal, you know, that you're going to store. But give you an example, like let's say there's several microphones you know obviously want in your recording studio. Have you ever heard of like a Neumann? Neumann microphones?
I think so.
Well, we all would, let's put it this way. Anyone that is setting up a studio, we all would love to have one. The problem is they're $6 fucking grand.
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Or
yeah.
You know, but that's what I'm saying is like, yeah, those are certain microphones that any Joe out there won't have. That studio will have them. Well, I hope they fucking do. There, you know, like a Neumann or a Sennheiser or an AKG, and then there's different, you know, obviously models of these companies that practically every fucking every studio that has recorded top level albums, you know, in the world, doesn't matter where. Those are usually those are the microphones that are pretty standard in those studios, you know. But then again, like for instance, like when me and Matt were recording at the LARS, or even at where I worked at Post Logic, we were recording through SSL fucking preamps. Straight up, man. I mean, just beautiful fucking signal path. And some of the microphones that we were using, we couldn't even dream to own just because of the pricing of them. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
And that's what makes up the studio, really, is just the microphones, preamps, and obviously, yeah, and medium to store it. But that's where it starts. Mics, freeze. Next, obviously, how you're going to store it. But, everyone's going to have their opinion. It's like, you know, but that's what, you know, as an engineer, you realize that you're like, well, how do you get these sweet sounds, man? You know, like that really sweet sound. And the thing is the cats that still have money, and, you know, as far as artists and bands that fucking have money to go record, they always end up recording in the fucking reel-to-reel MTR fucking 2-inch SSL fucking 4000 G plus, 6000, 6000J, 9000J, 9000K. Why? Because the analog world has this thing called natural saturation. It's a natural saturation.
I'm feeling naturally
distortion.
saturated.
What's that?
I'm feeling naturally saturated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've actually got I saw it earlier. I got a reel of 1-inch tape.
Uh-huh.
And I used to have some Grandmaster Gold. I think it was 2-inch. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know if I still got it, but I might.
1-inch. Hold on a second. 1-inch?
That's what I said.
Are you sure? That's just the tip.
Oh, snap. Bringing it around.
No, actually, I saw it earlier.
Like a professional.
I was moving some old boxes. And,
Well, 1 inch. Hold on. I mean, well, I know there's a half. One.
yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. It's the 8-track, right? And then you got the 16.
Well, 8-track.
Or what am I thinking? There's like a...
That'd probably be 4-track.
Is that the big thick tape?
Yeah, that's the 2-inch tape. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the standard 2-inch reel-to-reel. Now, I think they did make one, but...
Or like a 4-track.
Yeah, but they didn't call it a 1. It was something else. Well, the 4-track, the thing is like a lot of the stuff that we would get, like when I would restore. Okay, give you an example. I restored all the Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
And the stuff usually comes out of like salt mines. That's where they store the shit. I mean, literally, or like really heavily controlled environment. That's where all the media is at. But like 35, Indiana Jones was actually mastered onto a 35 millimeter tape. It's an 8-track Dolby, so it was actually encoded. So the way they actually, like, how to tell you this, most of the elements were on 35 millimeter 8-track, literally on recorded on film stock. They have such thing as like optical 35. And then they have mag 35. So there's different, meaning like the optical you actually had to have a lens that would read the optical waveform that was actually imprinted optically. It's almost like a needle on a vinyl. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, 1-inch, huh? I know there was a 1/2-inch that Sony came out with, but that was for a little bit and nobody really used it.
Listen, pal, I got you a 1/2-inch.
But anyway, what's that?
Maybe it is, but I saw it earlier. I just glanced at it. It was still in the box, And, like I was moving some stuff out of storage earlier today, and I kind of looked real quick in each one, and I was like, oh, there's some of that stuff,
Huh. So what, did you record stuff on it, or?
Well, we did have some 2-inch that me and Matt and Chris out in Washington, we recorded. We went to the studio, and we had about I think we had 30 minutes of 2-inch tape, right?
Uh-huh.
And we recorded like 3-4 songs on it.
Yeah.
Then we went to digital audio tape and recorded like 15 more songs all in the same day.
Oh, was it a DA8 or DAT?
Yeah, DAT.
Yeah.
Yeah, DAT. Okay. Yeah. So it was a stereo recording.
Yeah.
I'm still wondering if I got that 2-inch tape. I'll have to look for it. But anyways, not a big deal. But you're saying that the best way to still do it is to use like the 2-inch tape, right?
Well, that's the thing is like when you actually set up a 2-inch, like an MTR or an Otari, for instance. There's different machines, but those were pretty predominant in the workforce. And like an MTR, for instance, you would set it up with MRL tape, which are lab tapes that are created by a lab. And what they do is they have different types of tones on them that would set up the bias. And every tape that you would buy would have a +3, +6, or a +9 setup, which would give you the amount of headroom. Really, what it was really for is to set up the bias that would give you the headroom based on what kind of music you're going to be playing. So, like, if you're playing jazz, a lot of guys would set up like a +6, and if you were playing rock, they would set up like a +9 with the MRL. Classical, +3. And what I mean by that is that what I mean by the headroom is that if these tapes are set up, let's say you're setting up for a +9 to play some rock. So what happens is when it actually surpasses the +9 headroom, what happens at that point, there's what you would call a saturation, and at that point, the saturation is what they call is the natural distortion in an analog, which it doesn't sound like distortion. It literally it creates almost a very well-rounded
wavelength or tone.
Yeah, no, a tone, not really.
Yeah.
It's almost like, okay.
It's like a noise gate kind of?
And naturally compressing some.
Yeah.
So like, let's say on the digital realm, right, you would take a compressor and you would take a kick, for instance, and you want to compress it as certain amount of dB in to the certain amount of dB out with a certain ratio, meaning like 4:1, 5:1, 6:1 ratio, right? Now, what happens at that point in the analog world, you're actually getting the same concept, but it's done naturally. So the tape saturation actually compresses the kick and makes it more well-rounded and fat. You know what I mean? Just because for instance, the D112 microphone going through the analog 8 preamps, and then it's going through, the SSL board and then recording it digitally. Recording onto a 2-inch. Where it surpasses that +9, anything above that is what you would call is a natural compression, and that's why it's so very desirable, because it just has such a beautiful, rounded, compressed sound that in the digital world, it would just sound like shit.
It's like the rock and roll songs that you can crank up like super loud, and the louder they get, the better they sound. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, that's what you're talking about that's actually done. That's the headroom you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So what that is that it has what you would call as a dynamic range. So on the older albums, what they didn't do is they didn't over compress the shit out of the whole track. So there's nuances on different instruments, and when you, like, for instance, you take a Beatles album and you start cranking it up louder, and next thing you know, you're like, holy shit, there's a guitar there in the background, like far off to the side in the left speaker, kind of fucking buried, and you can't even hear it if you're at like F3. But as soon as you start cranking it up, that guitar starts to come out. Well, they did that was part of the art of the mixing and mastering, to have that dynamic range, where today what they do is they practically over compress the shit out of every fucking thing, and everything's in your face, almost like same level, same loudness and